Hello, everyone. This is Tom Plate. I'm a clinical professor in Asian American Studies, co-listed. My courses are always co-listed in political science. Very honored to be invited to contribute to this very brief summary of China and the election. And so if you would please allow me to speed through about 5,000 years of issues and problems with regard to China, and do so with some grace. I appreciate it because it's basically you're going to know how I know how little I know, and that is by virtue of having taught courses about Asia for the last 25 years, half of them at another university, and now about 10 or 11, almost something like that, at LMU. We started a new course about 4 years ago called China Looks at the US and the US Looks at China, the notion that the two of them are perceiving one another in different ways through different vehicles and methods. This particular chat is on the issue of China and the presidential election, which, as we know, is either coming up soon or when you see this will be over. So you will be able to laugh at all of my predictions and declaim me as, a professor who can't see the future. Maybe not the only one in the world, huh? The main thing about China is how much more we need to know that we don't know. We're looking at a country with 1.4 billion people, which is 4 times the number of people we have in the United States. So you can decide yourself whether you think the US has been doing a very good job of governing itself lately. And if your answer is no, multiply that times 4. And if China's leaders are doing only as badly as our leaders, I'm gonna try and get this off my eyes there, then you can see that it would be not easy to govern a country with 4 times as many people as we have in the US. We also know that China is run by a single party system. We are run by a two-party system, really. We also know that China has a different set of values than we do in some cases, although we have commonalities. Neither country wants to be poor. Neither country wants to be in a war. Neither country wants to be invaded. And neither country wants to have a pandemic like this, for which we can partly blame China, but we can't blame China for our subsequent mismanagement of it, of the pandemic. What do we know about China that we can say for sure? This will sound stupid, but it's very, very important. Not every member of the Chinese population of 1.4 billion is a card-carrying member of the Communist Party, nor wants to be. The Communist Party is by admission only. It's essentially elitist, although it claims to represent, all the people. It may, in a way, represent all the people better than the Republican Party or the Democratic Party, depending on your politics. I do not know, but that is their claim. And their claim is to have raised more people out of poverty in the last 20, 25 years than any government in the history of the recorded world, and that is a true fact. So we know that. We also know that it's expanding. We also know that it has a leader who's pretty tough, seems like a pretty tough guy, and he seems to know what he wants, and what he wants isn't always what we want, which should not surprise you. Most countries have their own national interests. Most countries, very few countries have 100% overlap. And the art of diplomacy, of course, is to maximize the overlap, and where there is tension, to somehow negotiate that either into the background or to extend the time period of the negotiation, but in all cases to avoid war. People who have read my columns over the years in first the Los Angeles Times, then in a chain of newspapers around the world, and now exclusively in one of the most high-profile newspapers on the globe, the South China Morning Post, They will know that my view is not pro-China or anti-China or pro-US or anti-US. My view is anti-war. The goal of my journalism is explain ways that these two Western, Eastern superpowers, really, China's just about there, um, how they can avoid either a Cold War, which was an enormous expense and over a long period of time, or a hot war, which presumably, if it goes beyond the bounds of a small circle, would be a nuclear war, which I don't think there is a sensible argument for nuclear war. Do you? If there is, would you please email me at tplate.lmu.edu and explain to me how you could win a nuclear war? I've not figured that out. No one, I don't think no one else has. It was an American general who said, well, if after all the ashes are done and all the bombs are set off, if there's 2 Americans and 1 Chinese, well, then we've won. You like that? If that makes sense to you, then I've lost you. Seems to me no one wins in a nuclear war, and so it needs to be avoided. The way to avoid it is, I think, in 3 ways. First way is we American citizens have to know more than we do about China. Secondly, our leaders have to be responsible in terms of negotiating with China, not kowtowing to their interest, but on the other hand, not opposing them just to oppose them on the grounds that the Communist Party is evil or communism is evil. That may be, but that's for the Lord to judge. No, I'm not comfortable judging that any political system other than Nazism or something of that nature is evil, especially one that has raised the standard of living in China more dramatically than any country in history. I'm not in a position to make that judgment. If you are, and you're comfortable with that, fine. But there are people in Asia who think our system is crazy. And in the last 3 or 4 years, you might think maybe they're not crazy to think that our system is crazy. So the purpose of my teaching and my journalism in a paper that I love, the South China Morning Post, from Hong Kong, I've been to Hong Kong, and has a website. And my work at Asia Media, which is a website at LMU, and my interaction with my distinguished colleagues in what must be one of the best college political science departments anywhere, the one at LMU, and I mean that. I'm in AAAS, so I'm relatively objective. I think AAAS is a very good department, but it's not large, it's not humongous like the PALS, and PALS is very, very good. I mean, it's a sign of a very good college. I went to a small college back east, and one of the greatest things about it was the political science department, which is why I majored in it. So with China, if we as educators don't do a better job in helping American people, and particularly young people, understand China, then we're in trouble. Now, the purpose of this talk is, of course, to talk about China and the election. So I have to say a few things about that, although in a way I almost find it distasteful. There are things about democracy that I absolutely adore, and there are some things that I do not. One thing that I do not is the kind of cheap electioneering that goes on during campaigns. But as much as one might or might not dislike the incumbent president of the United States, he is not the first man running for election or re-election to play the China card, to criticize China, to say China is really bad and he's the only one tough enough to stand up to it. If you go back in memory, Bill Clinton did that in his run for the presidency the first time. And then usually what happens is the candidate, if you win, Bill Clinton won, goes into office, sits behind a nicer desk than this, although I'm happy with the books I have behind me, and says, oh my God, this is 1.4 billion people. What I said in the campaign is one thing, but as president of the United States, I mean, let's be real. Let's be serious. How, you want to go to war with them? I don't think we'll, and maybe it'll be a draw. We haven't won a lot of wars lately. Even if we win, it'll be very costly. Must be a better way of relating to them than that. Why don't we try to negotiate some of these things? And negotiation means understanding that the United States isn't going to get everything it wants all the time. Now, reason that politicians have campaigned to use China in a campaign for two reasons. If they're Democratic politicians, then you get the human rights organizations who are very critical of China for its human rights policy, and that's a fair point. That's an absolutely fair point. But my only quarrel with the human rights organizations, some of which I give a few dollars, is that you have to put the issue in a larger context. You have to put what they do in the historical context, the fact that they've been around 4,000 to 5,000 years, the nature of their fears, the nature of their history. And that's why in my course on China, I use in effect as my textbook, Henry Kissinger's, I think, his masterpiece, his best book by far, called On China. Because he, as an historian, as well as someone who's visited and talked to and knows many of the leaders, going back to Mao and Zhou Enlai and all the way through Jiang Zemin, he gives me a perspective on how they look at things. No two countries look at the world alike. Canada, as close to us as it is, has a Canadian view, not an American view. China has a Chinese view, not an American view. So, so for the left side of the political spectrum, the human rights issue will come up, and candidates, they really want any vote they can get, so they'll bring up the human rights issue and ignore the other context. This year, with President Trump, he's brought up the issue of the fair trade and commercial issues. And that was a wise move domestically, because a lot of Republican businessmen are not happy with the way they have been treated. They're not happy having to play by Chinese rules in China. I don't know what they expected. You're when in Rome. But he has tilted his argument. I mean, Trump could care less about the human rights issue. So he's gone at China from the perspective of fair trade, copyright theft, alleged copyright theft, and issues like that. The copyright theft issue is diminishing every year. China is getting into it. They're always going to steal. Companies are always going to steal. Hertz steals from Avis, GE. But the Chinese do it more because they were further behind. And remember, they have 4 times as many people. But that is being worked, and it's being worked by some very smart people. The other issue, of course, is the trade war. Now, of all of the stupid things that the president has done, I think starting a trade war with the largest market in the world, with the world's most humongously developing economy, starting a trade war with that country is beyond stupidity. It's not a war you can win. It may be a war you can lose, and we may be losing it, but it's not even a war you want to win. If you humble the Chinese economically, A, you diminish your market for Western technological goods, and B, you may have undermined a country with 1.4 billion people, and as you may have noticed, our talent, American talent, for picking better regimes over the ones we knock out, right? Remember Iraq? That really worked well. Afghanistan really worked well. Libya really worked well. We're not on a run right now in terms of regime change. So instead of going the other way, and I would honestly say I'm not a Democrat or Republican, but almost in their naivete is not the right word, but something like that, insouciance or whatever, the Clinton administration had it right. They say, well, we don't know what to do with China. It's there are 4 times many people as us. They're booming like crazy. Why don't we just engage with them commercially, try and get a decent deal here and there, and assume they're not going to become Nazi Germany, which they're not. So that worked pretty well. But since the 2 terms of Clinton went out, and George W. came in, that's a whole other story. And then Obama came in, and Obama did some very many good things, but he got cold on China. And part of that, frankly, is due to Xi Jinping. Xi Jinping is not the guy I would want to spend in the Bahamas for a week, and just, well, actually I would as a journalist, but I mean on a vacation. He seems to be very cold and very difficult to negotiate. Jiang Zemin, his predecessor, Zhu Rongji, the prime minister of China, was, in my view, and the view of many, an absolute genius. That's when China boomed, when China was moving out, looking out, working, making sacrifices, changing internally. She seems to want to set the clock back. To me, a little bit like Trump wants to set the clock back, okay? The clock doesn't go back. Clock either stops, in which case even a broken clock is right twice a day, or time moves on. So my humble opinion, as I come up to near the end of my very brief presentation, is to say that the politics of the use of China in the election will probably not substantially affect the election, which I think, and I'll predict foolishly, will be won by Biden, the Biden ticket, and the excellent vice presidential choice, but will be lost no matter what he does. It might, there are some votes in anti-China, and some of that is people they just can't swallow the Communist Party even when it's successful. I get that. And some people are just racist. They don't like the Chinese. We did terrible things to the Japanese. We've done terrible things to, a lot of minorities. I mean, the south of our border. When we have a problem, a big problem, we tend to like to blame others. But when China has a problem, it tends to blame itself. It tends to blame its own internal system. The leaders use the horrible, satanic United States, the way Trump uses the horrible, satanic China. But in reality, China will blame itself if things go seriously wrong. And I want to leave you with this one final thought, which connects to my original thought. I'm sorry I don't have more time with you. The thought is this. There are 1.4 billion Chinese. Of them, only a very small percentage are members of the Communist Party of China. Do you think that all 1.3 billion people in China all agree 100% with everything that the Communist Party says or thinks? Do you think 1.4 billion people are brainwashed? They all have the same thought? You don't think they mutter and complain? If the local services don't work? Think they were happy with the COVID mess up? Do you think they agree with the president? They'll say they do, but they're human beings, just like you, just like me. Treat them as human beings and you'll get reciprocity. Treat them as commie devils, and I think you're not going to have a good future. I don't think the world will be stable unless the US and China has a working relationship that's productive and positive. Thank you very much. This was Tom Plate. I wish I had more time with you. Probably good for you that I don't. And thanks to BCLA for inviting me to give this chat.